I am happy to be here this morning. It's funny. I'm not sure how many breaths I've taken this morning. Uh, I don't tend to keep track, but I just noticed that I think this last couple minutes was the first time I actually took a slow and intentional breath in my entire morning. And that's something that's something I think is interesting. Well, maybe not interesting. Is interesting even really a word? What does it even mean? It's something that I'm intrigued by. Um, how I've been keeping these practices for a number of years, and still I'll just slough them off, and not pay attention to the things that I know that I need to be doing. Um, and what I mean by that is that um, I know that these practices help keep me centered and regulated. Right? I know that they help me to calm uh, a regularly disrupted central nervous system. Um, and why that central nervous system is disrupted, there's probably a lot of reasons, and I think that maybe many of us experience this. But of course, you've got the big ones. You've got the childhood traumas. You've got stress and PTSD and stress responses. Uh, and I think that alone is this huge category that we could break down into many, many smaller categories. Um, for instance, the amount of media that we take in each day, that's a huge stressor. Um, we are externalizing a lot of our locus of power into this machine of fear. And yes, it is great to be connected with what's happening in the world, and it's good to not look away from that. And I think it's important to remember that these things are also stressors, and it's not to say that we need to delete stress from our life, because that's doesn't seem reasonable. It doesn't even seem preferable. So, what is the answer then? Um, I think for me, the answer is to keep the practices that balance my body, and to remember where my center is and who has control over that. Um, because so often it can feel very much like we are um, sort of helplessly flinging through existence, as all of these externalities, all of these things outside of us are affecting our lives in such huge ways. But inevitably, what I find is um, I am the one who is responsible for my inner self. I am the one who is inevitably responsible for my health, my well-being, my the effect that my stress is having on my body. I do have the ability to affect and transition myself out of a place of um, helpless fear and into a space of understanding and calm and relative centeredness. Now, that is a privilege. And I think that's important to remember. At least it is for me. I find it to be important in my life to remember that in this moment, I am privileged to be able to take a slow breath and to breathe in through my nose to the bottom of my belly and to slowly release. Let's do that again. Breathe in through the nose, all the way pulling the diaphragm down towards the bottom of the belly. And one more. Okay. See, even in those 3 breaths, I feel a shift in my body. I feel a calm and an ability to step out of the crisis mindset that I can sometimes find myself in. And I think we all find ourselves there, especially in this modern world, living here in the US, with one of the most terrifying economies um, in history, I think. There was a recent study that came out that the economic situation of most Americans today is far less secure and less stable than the average person during the Great Depression. And we've been able to trick ourselves into believing that it's not this unstable and that it's not terrifying and insecure because of all of the cheap plastic goods that we can purchase. And we can fill our lives with cheap plastic food and cheap plastic containers and cheap plastic clothes. And this somehow convinces us as we acquire things psychologically we are tricking ourselves into thinking that we don't have the insecurity of knowing that at any moment any of us could lose every bit of everything that we have. It wouldn't take much for most of us to lose any sort of a home that we have or any sort of job security or um, even relationship status or physical health. All of these things they are all very precarious, and that knowledge is very stressful. And it's a low grade stress, like the hum of a fluorescent light in the back of our consciousness, right? And still, I say that it's a privilege to take those 3 breaths because those 3 breaths remind my body that I am not in imminent danger, in immediate danger right now in this moment. Um, when we have a psychological crisis or an energetic crisis, when we are ramped up into our fear and our scarcity and our defensive responses, the body is getting all of the signals that we are in danger. This is what PTSD is. This is what it does. If you have PTSD or CPTSD, or even if you may not have, the pathologized PTSD, but some of us get just triggered into emotional states that cause a full body response. And that's for good reason, is our body does not differentiate the difference between fear and danger. That's our mind. Our mind differentiates fear and danger. But when our body is sending us signals that we are in danger, heightened blood pressure, heightened heart rate, uh, uh, deeper mouth breathing directly into the chest. These are all things that we do when we are preparing to fight or to run away from something. And so our body's response to that, of course, is going to be to get ready to run or to fight. And then our brain, our mind rather, will take a cue from that and create the story that we are under attack. And this is an emotional reaction to our mind's distorted view of our world based on our body's experience of what's happening. It's this big self-serving loop of fear. And when I can breathe slowly, I can remind myself and my body and my mind that I am not in danger. My diaphragm moves downward, massaging the internal organs and the solar plexus. That slow breath in and out, that rhythmic pattern, the diaphragm up and down, the contraction and the release on this slow rhythm starts to send messages to the body's hormonal systems to release oxytocin. And now we're starting to feel calm, and it's starting to counteract the cortisol that's been flooding our system when we were thinking that we needed to protect ourselves. So there is everything hinging on the breath right there in that moment. My mindset, my emotional state, my physical body, all of this is being shifted with intentional breath. And the reason this is a privilege is because we don't have a danger looming over us in this moment. And that's not always true. It's not always true for any of us. And that's not always true for some of us more often than not. And so I just want to, in this season of gratitude, thankfulness, I just want to take that moment to recognize I spent my whole morning going from seemingly one minor crisis to the next, uh, triggered into an emotional state by a fear that is brought upon by maybe conflict or um, a fear of how I'm being perceived or how I will be perceived. I'm not sure exactly, but I know that I get triggered into these light sort of crises. Um, and then I power through in this heightened state. And it's mostly imperceivable to some. You can't really make it out. I don't look like it. I don't walk into the room and everybody in the room says, "Oh, what's going on?" No, that's not the case. And that's not the case for most of us, right? But internally, there's conflict. And it often comes from external conflict. But the key here, I believe, is to remember who it is that's having this experience and what this experience is and what I choose in the moment to engage with. And when I don't choose, when I allow unconscious drivers to sort of run the show for me, then oftentimes my body goes into protection mode. I haven't completely worked myself out of that habit. So the fact that it's 3 hours since I've 3+ hours, 3.5 hours since I've awoken this morning, and I just took my first few intentional breaths just 15 minutes ago. It tells me that I'm letting the unconscious driver run the show. And it helps me to understand and be graceful with myself, to give myself grace, forgiveness and love and kindness. So if you experience that, if you're experiencing that today, let's give ourselves grace. And if you're not experiencing that in this moment, then this is a really great time to do the practice. So if we're experiencing that sort of unconscious low-level crisis state, it's a good time to do the practice. And if we're not experiencing that crisis state, it's a good time to do the practice. Either way. Let's find our meditation posture for just a moment. You may be seated on the floor as I am, on a pillow or a rug, legs crossed in any number of positions. Perhaps you're seated on a couch or a chair with your feet flat to the floor. You might be standing, walking, or driving. Wherever you are in this moment, let's just spend a little bit of time in devotion to our breath. Straightening the spine as much as you can while remaining relaxed. Gently bringing the shoulder blades together in the back of the body, just enough to open the chest and open the heart. Placing your hands with your palms facing upward on your lap, or holding them gently in front of your belly. Breathing in through the nose and release. Extend your out breath longer and deeper than your in breath. Breathe in and release. Breathe in and release. Find your rhythm. and just focus simply on the breath. You can stay in this breathing rhythm for as long as you'd like, as long as you feel comfortable, and go as deep as you choose. You can continue following the breath and go into amazing places. It's phenomenal, really. As I'm wrapping up this shared practice, it just has me thinking about what it is we do when we lack connection. And what I mean by lack connection is when we believe that we don't have connection, when we put conscious energy into the belief that we are separate individuals who are totally and 100% alone and responsible for ourselves completely and only and totally, then we begin to think that connection is these really unhealthy, clingy ways of reacting and interacting with one another. And when we think that we're living in a constant state of crisis, then those interactions are going to be based upon our belief that this is life or death. This situation, this experience, this thing is either you're with me or you're against me. That's all there is. There's black and white. It's very clear cut when you're in those situations. And then it becomes abusive. We start to abuse the connections that we do have. We abuse um, ourself and others in these relationships when it becomes about control and um, we start to force others to be responsible for our emotional state. And that's just not fair. I can't allow anyone else to be responsible for my emotional state because I'm the only one who has the ability to tap into the roots of my emotional expression. I'm the only one that has to learn how to sit with and listen to my emotions in a way that is loving and kind so that I don't weaponize them and use them against other people. But don't confuse that with being the only one who's responsible in the relationship for our sense of connectedness. Yeah, that's the word, I think. There is nobody who is responsible for that. That connectedness is already there. We are already connected. You don't earn being connected. You don't earn getting disconnected. These aren't based on deserving. Nobody deserves love. It just is. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to earn the right to be loved. You don't have to protect your ability to be loved. We just have to simply allow ourselves to understand that we are already held. We are already connected and we are already a part of love. And that is really difficult in times of crisis. Whether those crises are material, real world danger, or whether that crisis is simply one of fear. And more often than not, we can find ourselves being in the crisis of fear than the crisis of danger. Now, that's not true across the board. I want to be clear about that. There are many people in this world whose daily existence is one of danger. There is crisis of danger there. Um, but if you're listening to this right now, you might not be one of those people. Or substance use disorders. Like this level of anger and resentment, these are all the outcrop of the crisis of fear. So it's understandable. It's understandable when we stop and give ourselves grace to see why it is we behave the way we behave sometimes. And it also makes it possible to stop it. It makes it possible when we take those 3 breaths to look at ourselves and find where I can make a resolute choice to bring love into the relationship. How can I get in the way of a weaponized emotion of mine or another? What does it look like to get in the way rather than try to dominate or control? What is the difference there? It's subtle. But these practices, this is the beginning point. It's just the beginning. And as we can begin to understand how connected we are, we can start to tap into our responsibility as not just being my personal responsibility with my bootstraps and my fear of scarcity, but it is a responsibility to the whole. It's an obligation that we have to the world to find our way into love and bring that to the table. And it has to start with 3 breaths. Finding your center. Root in your forgiveness and your grace. Extend your compassion and your care. And know that you are held. Thank you for joining this morning on the journey home. I'm happy to be here with you all. Hari Om.